Diane Watkins was 34 years old when she handed her husband a protein bar at the front door and watched him load the same carry-on he packed every September into a rideshare headed for Miami. 6 years of the same goodbye. 6 years of the same kiss on her forehead, never her mouth. 6 years of trusting that the man she built a life with was exactly where he said he was. This year, she followed him. And standing in that terminal, watching Roland tuck a stranger's hair behind her ear with a tenderness Diane hadn't seen in 4 years of her own marriage, something in her went completely still. Not broken, still. The kind of still that comes just before something moves. What Roland didn't know was that Diane managed 3 hotel properties, knew every layer of how hospitality systems logged passenger information, and that she'd just been handed a last-minute assignment on a ship leaving the same port. He'd been calling it a boys' trip for 6 years. He'd used her credit to fund it. He had no idea she was already on the water, and he had no idea what she was about to find. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The rideshare pulled up at 7:14 in the morning, right on time. Diane stood in the doorway in her robe and watched Roland wheel his carry-on down the front path. One bag. Just like always, neat, compact, already handled. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had done this exact thing so many times that it required no thought at all. She had the protein bar ready, the kind with the dark chocolate coating and the sea salt, the only flavor he'd eat. She'd picked up a box at the grocery store Tuesday without even putting it on her list, just remembered, reached for it, dropped it in the cart. 8 years of marriage does that. It builds itself into your hands. "You're going to miss your window if the 95 is bad," she said. Roland looked up and smiled. That smile, wide, easy, the one that still worked on her even when she didn't want it to. He took the bar from her hand. "I'll be fine." He stepped up onto the porch and kissed her. Forehead, not her mouth. His lips pressed just above her eyebrows for half a second, and then he was already pulling back, already turning, already gone. She stood there a moment longer than she needed to. The rideshare door closed. The car pulled away. Diane watched it reach the end of the block, signal right, and disappear. She went inside and made coffee. By 9 o'clock, she was at work, and the hotel had already given her 2 problems to solve before she'd finished her first cup. The Grand Alderton was a 14-floor, full-service hotel in the heart of the business district, the kind of place that hosted corporate retreats on Monday and wedding receptions on Saturday, and somehow kept both sides of that equation feeling like the only guest that mattered. Diane had worked there for 11 years. She'd started at the front desk, 23 years old, learning the rhythms of the building like she was learning a language. She was fluent now. "Diane!" Marcus, her front desk supervisor, caught her before she reached her office. His face had that specific look, the one that meant something had already gone wrong, and he'd been waiting for her to walk through the door before he allowed himself to fully panic. "Ballroom A and B. We've got a double book." She didn't stop walking. "When did it come through?" "Late entry last night. The Hendricks retirement party has a confirmed contract for 6 p.m., but the Callaway Group says they have an email confirmation for the same space, same time. Sales dropped the ball on the communication side. Pull both contracts, move the Callaway setup to the terrace room, and comp their bar package for the inconvenience." She pushed open her office door. "Call me before you make contact with either party." Marcus was already nodding before she finished the sentence. He'd worked with her for 4 years. He knew the pace. She sat down, opened her laptop, and got to work. Harold stopped by her office just before noon, the way he did when something was good. Harold Sims had been her mentor for 6 of her 11 years at the Alderton, and he moved through the building like a man who had earned the right to walk slowly, measured, deliberate. Everything about him was considered. "The Callaway people specifically asked for you by name," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Said you were the one who personally reached out. Said you made them feel like the mix-up was a favor. They got a better room and a free bar." Diane didn't look up from her screen. "I just explained the math." Harold laughed, a low, genuine sound. "That's what I mean. You make the impossible look administrative." He tilted his head. "Roland get off okay this morning?" "Same as always." "What is it this year? The Bahamas?" He didn't specify. She smiled at her monitor, and the smile was natural enough that it reached her eyes. He never really does. It's a boys' trip. I don't think there's much of an itinerary." Harold nodded like that made sense and left her to it. The reimbursement request came in at 2:47 p.m. One of the sales associates had used a personal card for a vendor dinner and needed the expense logged with a loyalty account number for the travel points audit. Standard. Diane had done it 100 times. She pulled up the corporate travel portal and typed in Roland's name. His account pre-populated. She'd used it before on a shared booking, years ago, and her browser had kept it. She glanced at the number, confirmed it. Then she saw it. A second result. Same last name. First name listed as R. Tomas Watkins. A middle name Roland had never used. Not once in 8 years. Not on a piece of mail, not on a form, not anywhere in her presence. A separate account. Active. The points balance loaded on the screen. Over 80,000. She stared at the number. 80,000 points. Earned over how many trips? How many flights? How many hotel nights she had never known about? She picked up her phone. Roland's name was right there at the top of her recent calls. She set the phone back down. She sat very still at her desk. Outside her office window, the hotel moved. Carts rolling, doors opening, voices crossing the lobby in the easy hum of a managed afternoon. Everything exactly as it should be. Diane folded her hands on the desk in front of her. Something had shifted behind her eyes. Quiet. Permanent. The kind of shift that doesn't make noise because it doesn't need to. She opened a new tab and got back to work. The call came in on a Tuesday, just after 2 in the afternoon. Diane was in the middle of reviewing linen inventory reports when her cell phone lit up on the desk. Harold's name on the screen. She answered on the second ring. "I need a favor." He skipped the greeting entirely, which meant it was urgent. Harold only skipped the greeting when he was already past the point of pleasantries. "I have an executive retreat departing Miami tomorrow morning. Caribbean sailing, 4 days, 22 senior managers from the parent group. My hospitality lead just pulled out. Family emergency. Her father had a stroke this morning. I need someone I trust to run point on the logistics end. Meals, excursions, vendor coordination, all of it." Diane pulled a pen from her cup and held it without writing anything. "Tomorrow morning. I know what I'm asking. I wouldn't ask if I had another option I trusted." She almost said no. The words were already forming. She had 3 active vendor reviews, a weekend event in 36 hours. Marcus was still learning the Saturday turnover protocol. She had reasons. Good ones. Then something moved in the back of her mind. Roland's cruise departed from Miami. She knew that much. It was one of the few details he'd offered, almost offhand, a week ago while she was making dinner and he was looking at his phone. "We fly into Miami Thursday morning, board early afternoon." She hadn't thought much of it then. She was thinking about it now. "What ship?" she asked. Harold gave her the name. It was not the same ship. But it was the same port. Same terminal complex. Same departure window. She set the pen down. "I'll need to rearrange Thursday's coverage. I'll make a call to your GM. I'll handle my own coverage, Harold." Her voice was even. "Send me the retreat file. I'll be on the first morning flight." She packed that night in under an hour. She had always been a clean packer, a skill born from years of managing site visits and last-minute property inspections. She moved through her closet with purpose. Work clothes, 1 dinner option, a rain jacket she'd probably never need and always brought anyway, toiletries already organized in a quart bag because she had learned years ago to keep that bag ready. Roland's side of the closet was neat and mostly empty. She noticed because she noticed everything. She zipped her bag at 10:22 p.m. and went to bed. Miami was gray and thick with humidity when she landed the next morning, the sky pressing low over the highway like a held breath. The port terminal rose up ahead of the cab, enormous and white, all glass and movement. Diane had her work badge lanyard around her neck before she stepped out of the cab. The retreat documents were organized in her tote. Manifests, excursion bookings, dietary restrictions flagged in 3 different colors. She was already running the morning's logistics in her head as she moved through the terminal's main entrance, heels quiet on the polished floor, pulling her bag behind her. The terminal was loud with departure energy. Couples, families, groups of people in matching t-shirts. The smell of salt air and sunscreen drifted in every time the exterior doors opened. She was heading toward the check-in corridor for her ship when she heard it. The laugh. She knew it before her brain fully processed it. It was the kind of laugh she had heard hundreds of times, easy and warm, just loud enough to carry. The laugh Roland used when he was performing for someone he wanted to impress. She stopped. She turned slowly, the way you do when you already know what you're going to see, and your body is trying to buy your mind a few extra seconds. He was at the terminal bar, a small horseshoe counter near the windows overlooking the water. He was sitting on a stool, one elbow on the bar, relaxed in that easy way he had when he felt completely safe. There was no group of men around him, no college friends, no one from work. There was a woman. She was young, early 30s maybe, dark hair, bright smile, her carry-on leaning against the bar stool beside her. She was laughing at something Roland had just said, her head tilting back with it, and Roland was watching her with an expression Diane recognized distantly, the way you recognize a word in a language you used to speak. He reached over and tucked a strand of the woman's hair behind her ear. Slow, gentle, the kind of gesture that belongs to something that has been practiced long enough to become automatic. Diane had not seen that gesture in 4 years. She turned back around. She walked toward her corridor. Her heels were still quiet on the floor. Her bag still rolled smoothly behind her. Her lanyard still hung straight. The cabin was small and clean, with a porthole window that looked out onto the open water. Diane set her tote on the desk, her bag against the wall. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the porthole. The ocean was very blue and very still and very large. She allowed herself exactly 30 minutes. When the timer on her phone went off, she stood up, washed her face, and opened her laptop. The timer went off. Diane stood, washed her face, and sat back down at the desk. She opened her laptop. She stared at the screen for a moment without typing anything. Then she picked up her phone and called Yvette. It rang twice. "Hey, you're supposed to be on a work trip. I need you to find out when this started." Diane's voice was flat, even, the way it got when she was managing something difficult at work and needed everyone around her moving clearly. "Roland, there's a woman. They're on the same cruise. He's not on a boys' trip. He never was." Silence on the other end. Not the silence of shock. Yvette's silence was different. It was the silence of someone absorbing information and filing it away. "How long have you known?" Yvette asked. "About 4 hours." "Okay." A pause. "Okay. What do you need?" "A timeline. Whatever you can find. And, Yvette?" Diane stopped. "Don't say anything that sounds like pity." Another beat of silence. Then, "Say less. I'm already on it." Diane ended the call and set the phone down beside the laptop. Outside the porthole, the water had gone dark with the early evening. The ship was moving now, a slow and steady pull away from the port. She could feel it faintly beneath her feet. She sat still and let herself feel it, and then she turned to the retreat manifest on her screen and started working. By day, she was exactly who Harold needed her to be. She ran the morning logistics briefing with her notes already printed. She walked the dining setup before the managers arrived. She flagged a shellfish allergy that had been logged incorrectly in the catering file and had it corrected before the first lunch service. She smiled at the right moments, answered questions clearly, and solved 3 small problems before they became larger ones. Harold watched her handle a schedule conflict between 2 competing shore excursion groups on Wednesday morning, and afterward said only, "Good catch," which, from Harold, was considerable praise. Nobody on that retreat could have told you that anything was wrong with her. But at night, the cabin door closed, and the work was different. She had been in hospitality long enough to know how information moved through a ship. Guest services, excursion desks, dining manifests. Most of it was coordination infrastructure, scheduling, logistics, vendor confirmations, and most of it was accessible to the right people for the right reasons. She had the right reasons. She remembered a passenger services coordinator named Colette from a hospitality conference 2 years back. They had sat next to each other during a panel on excursion vendor management, exchanged cards, kept in loose professional contact. Colette worked fleet operations for a major cruise line. It took Diane 20 minutes to find which ship Roland was on. His ship was different from hers, but the cruise line was the same parent company. She was not asking for anything private. She was not asking Colette to do anything improper. She reached out Wednesday evening with a professional note, a question about excursion manifest formats, framed around a vendor coordination process she was managing for Harold's retreat. Colette responded within the hour, helpful as always, and in the course of that exchange, she shared her screen briefly on a video call to demonstrate the booking interface. Diane saw exactly what she needed. Roland's name was on a shore excursion booked for Thursday, St. Thomas, a catamaran sail. Watkins, Roland, +1. +1. She photographed the booking confirmation on Colette's shared screen before the call ended. Clean, clear, time-stamped. She sat back in her chair. 6 years of these trips. 6 years of the same carry-on, the same Thursday morning kiss on the forehead, the same, "You know how the guys get when we're all together," said with such easy familiarity that she had never thought to question the texture of it. She had never once been his +1. She looked at the photograph on her phone for a long time. Then she saved it to a folder she labeled Work Travel Documents and closed the app. She went up to the bow after midnight, when the deck was mostly empty. The water was black beneath her, barely visible except where the ship's running lights caught the surface and made it shine for a moment before the dark swallowed it again. The air was warm and dense, and it smelled like salt and distance. She stood at the rail and let the wind push against her face. She was not crying. She had already done that. She was not angry. Anger was loud, and she had no use for loud right now. She was thinking in systems, the way she always did when something needed to be built from the ground up. What did she have? What did she need? What order did it go in? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She already knew who it was before she looked. "Miss you, babe." 3 words from a man sitting on a different ship in a different cabin next to a woman he had tucked a strand of hair behind the ear of. She read the message once. She set the phone face down on the rail. Then she picked it up, went back to her cabin, and went to sleep. The flight home was quiet. Diane had a window seat and a coffee she didn't finish. She watched the clouds below the plane and thought about nothing in particular. That was a skill she had developed over years of managing other people's crises, the ability to go deliberately blank when the mind needed rest before the next task. She used it now, stored everything, let herself be empty for a few hours at 30,000 feet. The cab dropped her home at 5:30. She unlocked the door, rolled her bag inside, and stood in the entryway for a moment. The house smelled like the candle she had left burning on the kitchen counter timer. Familiar, unchanged, everything exactly where she had left it. She put her bag in the laundry room. She changed her clothes. She started dinner. Roland came home at 7. She heard his key in the lock, heard him set his bag down in the hallway, heard the particular sound of him loosening his watch and setting it on the entry table, a small sound she had lived beside for 8 years and never thought about until now. "Hey," he said, coming into the kitchen. He looked relaxed, rested even. His shoulders had that loose, easy quality he always carried back from these trips, the look of a man who had spent several days entirely unbothered. He kissed her cheek. "Something smells good." "Pasta," she said. "Nothing special." He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "How was the work thing?" "Productive." She stirred the sauce. Harold was happy. How was the trip? And then he talked. That was the part that would stay with her later, not the lying itself, because she had already accepted the lying. What stayed with her was how good he was at it. He talked about the guys the way he always did, with the right level of detail. Marcus had sunburned his whole neck on day 2. They'd had a terrible meal at one of the ports, someplace with overpriced fish that wasn't worth it. The weather had been perfect except for one rough afternoon when half of them were too nauseous to leave the deck. He laughed at that. A real laugh. Not one hesitation. Not one misplaced pause. She ate her pasta and asked about the food. He answered. She asked about the weather. He answered that too. She nodded at the right moments and refilled her water glass and let him be fluent. He had been practicing this for 6 years. He had it perfect. After dinner, Roland took a shower. She heard the water come on. She counted 10 seconds. Old habit, she didn't know why. And then she picked up her phone and sat down at the kitchen table. They had set up a shared cloud account years ago. Early in the marriage, optimistic and organized, the kind of couple that made joint folders for vacation photos and holiday cards, and the house renovation they kept almost starting. She used it sometimes for recipe photos. Roland had stopped using it, or so she had thought. She opened the account. His storage was nearly full. She had not noticed that before. She had not had reason to look. She went into his folder. Family photos, the ones she expected, going back years. Then a subfolder, unnamed, sitting at the bottom of the list with a generic timestamp for a title. The kind of thing that happened when a phone backed up automatically to a location someone forgot they had. She opened it. 3 years of photographs looked back at her. The woman from the bar. The woman from the terminal. Bianca, Diane thought, though she didn't know the name yet. She was in all of them. A restaurant with string lights and red wine on the table. A beach somewhere with white sand, both of them in the water. Roland laughing with his whole body the way he used to laugh when they first started dating. A hotel room with the curtains open and the city below. Then another. Then another. Diane kept scrolling, and then she stopped. She recognized the duvet cover first. A pale gray with thin white stripes from a home goods store in the city. She had ordered it online on a Tuesday night, 18 months ago, lying in this very bed, because she had decided to redo the guest room and wanted something clean and simple. The woman was sitting on that bed. Bianca, wearing a short white robe, the one Diane had bought at a hotel gift shop in Charleston 2 years ago and tossed into the guest room closet because she never used it. He had brought her here. Into this house, into the room Diane had painted and furnished and styled herself. He had laid out Diane's robe for her like it was nothing. Diane sat very still. Then she started screenshotting. Every photograph. Systematic. She went to the bank app next, pulled up the joint account history going back 4 years, and looked at the withdrawals she had always seen labeled under R. Investments. Regular. Spaced out, never quite large enough to alarm her. She added them up now. The number sat on her screen. She forwarded everything to her personal email, every screenshot, every bank record. Then she cleared her recent activity, set her phone face down, and heard the shower cut off down the hall. Roland came to bed 20 minutes later. He kissed her cheek, the same angle, the same casual press of his lips that meant nothing, and had probably always meant nothing. He said good night against her hair. He was asleep in minutes. She could hear his breathing even out beside her. She lay on her back in the dark, eyes open. The ceiling above her was the same ceiling it had always been, the same faint water stain near the window she kept meaning to address. She did not look at Roland. She was already building the next step. Diane left the house at 6:15. Roland was still asleep. She had watched him for a moment from the doorway, not with longing, not with anger, just watching, taking in the shape of someone she had shared a bed with for 8 years, and understanding, clearly and without drama, that she had been sleeping next to a stranger who wore a familiar face. She picked up her keys. She closed the door behind her without a sound. She called Yvette at 6:30, stopped at a red light 3 blocks from the house, the morning still gray and quiet around her. "Talk to me," Yvette said. She picked up on the second ring. She always picked up on the second ring when it was Diane. Diane talked. She kept her voice even and her eyes on the road. She described the cloud folder the way she would describe a logistics problem at work, systematically, in order, without decoration. The subfolder, the 3 years of photographs, the restaurant, the beach, the hotel rooms, then the guest bedroom, the duvet, the robe. Yvette was quiet through all of it. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "I knew it," or "that bastard," or any of the things a person might say. She was a paralegal, and she understood that the moment called for listening, not reacting. When Diane finished, Yvette said, "Okay, the bank withdrawals. How far back?" 4 years. Total amount? I'm still calculating. It's significant. A pause. Di. Just her name, said in a way that carried everything Yvette wasn't performing. I know, Diane said. Another pause. Then Yvette shifted. There's something I found yesterday that I was going to tell you last night. Roland's friend Deshawn. You know him? We've met a few times. College friend. They co-own a rental property somewhere. Right. A mutual friend mentioned, kind of offhand, that Deshawn has been pulling back from Roland. Won't return calls. Missed his birthday thing last year. It's been over a year of distance, apparently. Diane considered that. Okay, she said. I thought it was worth noting, Yvette said. It is. The light changed. Diane drove. I'll call him today. She waited until after lunch. She sat in her office with the door closed, the building quiet outside her window, and she pulled up Deshawn's number from her contacts. She had it from a group dinner 2 years ago, exchanged casually and never used. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Deshawn, this is Diane Watkins. A silence. Not the silence of someone caught off guard, the silence of someone who had been waiting for something and had just felt it arrive. Diane, he said. I know about the woman, she said. Tell me what you know. He let out a long breath. It wasn't surprise, it was relief. The specific, complicated relief of a man who had been carrying weight for a long time and had just been given permission to set it down. I'm sorry, he said first. I need to say that before anything else. I'm sorry. I hear you. What do you know? He told her. 2 years ago, after a night out, Roland had told him, not carefully, carelessly, the way men sometimes tell things when they are drunk and proud and need an audience. He had described Bianca in detail, how they met, how long it had been going on at that point, which was already over a year. Deshawn had been uncomfortable and said so. He had told Roland it needed to stop. Roland had listened politely. Then, about a week later, he had brought up the rental property, their partnership agreement, how a legal dispute over the asset, if it ever came to that, would be costly and complicated for both of them. He hadn't said, stay quiet or else. He hadn't needed to. The shape of the message was clear enough. Deshawn had stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't my place, he said. I told myself you'd find out on your own. I told myself a lot of things. His voice was flat with self-disgust. None of it was true. I just didn't want the trouble. I know, Diane said. I have texts, Deshawn said, from the early months, before he figured out I wasn't going to be okay with it. He sent me stuff. Bragging, I guess. Photos, details. I kept them. I don't know why I kept them, but I did. Send them to me. All of it? All of it. Her phone buzzed within 2 minutes. She put Deshawn on speaker and opened the messages. The woman's name was Bianca. It was right there, in Roland's own words, sent to his college friend with the casual confidence of a man who did not believe he would ever be held accountable. The timeline was clear. The transfers were referenced directly. Roland describing, in one text, how he had moved some things around to cover a trip. In another, something about an account Diane doesn't check. Diane pulled up her bank screenshots alongside the texts. She cross-referenced. 4 years. Withdrawals spaced carefully, never large enough to trigger alarm on their own. But together, stacked and totaled, the number was $40,000. She checked the equity line, the one she had co-signed 3 years ago. Her name, her credit score, her financial history used as the foundation. $40,000. Some of it was hers in the most literal way possible. She thanked Deshawn quietly and ended the call. Then she sat in her parked car in the lot outside her office building, both hands resting in her lap, and she stared at the steering wheel. Her money, her credit, her name, signed in good faith on a document she had trusted him with, used to fund another woman's life. Diane made dinner with what was already in the refrigerator. Leftover rice, some chicken she'd cooked Tuesday, a salad thrown together in under 10 minutes. She set Roland's plate on the counter and told him she had work to finish. "On a Thursday night?" he said, but lightly. Not a real question. "Logistics for a conference bid," she said. "It won't take long." He nodded and carried his plate to the couch. The television came on 30 seconds later, a sports recap. Crowd noise filtered down the hall. Diane closed the office door. She found the blog in under 4 minutes. It was right there in Deshawn's forwarded texts. Roland had described Bianca to his college friend with the specificity of a man showing off a purchase. Her name, her profession, the name of the blog she ran. "She does this travel thing. Pretty big following." Diane had read that line twice earlier today in the parking lot and felt something cold move through her chest. He had been proud. He had been showing her off. The blog was called Bianca in Motion. Clean design, warm photography, destinations stacked in neat grids. Lisbon, Tulum, Santorini, a weekend in New Orleans. A professional contact form sat at the bottom of the About page. Diane looked at it for a long moment. Then she typed. "This is Roland Watkins's wife. I'm not here to fight you. I think you deserve to know who you've actually been with. If you want to talk, I'm available." She entered her cell number. She clicked send. She leaned back in her chair and listened to the crowd noise from the television down the hall. 47 minutes later, her phone rang. Bianca's voice was cautious at first. Careful the way a person is careful when they are walking into a room and don't yet know the floor plan. But there was something underneath the caution. Something already cracked. "He told me you were separated," Bianca said. "We were not," Diane said. A sharp exhale. "He said the divorce had been in process for almost a year, that you two had basically been living separate lives, that it was just a matter of paperwork." She paused. "He said you knew." "I did not know." Another silence, longer this time. "He talked about you," Bianca said finally. Her voice had shifted, the caution burning off now, replaced by something rawer. "I feel like I should tell you that. He talked about you." "What did he say?" Bianca was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how honest to be. Then she decided. "He said you had let yourself go. That you stopped caring about how you looked, how you presented yourself." A pause. "He said you cared more about your job than your marriage. That you were cold. That he had tried for years to get through to you and you just weren't there." Diane sat very still. She knew every one of those lines. Not because she had heard Roland say them directly, but because she had heard versions of them. Small, offhand comments. The casual observation about her weight at a dinner party, delivered with a smile. The way he framed her work trips as choices she made instead of them. The times he had called her too calm in arguments, as if her composure were a form of neglect. He hadn't said those things to hurt her. That's what she'd believed at the time. She had thought it was friction, the small wear of a long marriage. She understood now what it actually was. He had been building a file, running a story with 2 audiences, Bianca on one side, their social circle on the other, so that when he was ready to leave, there was already a version of events in circulation. A version where Diane was the problem, where Roland was a patient man who had simply run out of patience. He had been preloading the narrative, quietly, for years. "He recently asked me to move in with him," Bianca said. Her voice was thinner now. "Last month. He said he was finally filing, that it was happening." Diane's hand was resting flat on her desk. She pressed it down harder. Finally filing. She thought about the argument in August. Roland frustrated about a calendar she had supposedly double-booked, a dinner she hadn't actually scheduled wrong, but had apologized for anyway because it was easier. She thought about the one in September, sharp words over something she couldn't even clearly recall now, something minor, something she had smoothed over within the hour because that was what she did. She thought about the one 3 weeks ago, his voice clipped and aggrieved, her own voice going deliberately quiet because she had learned years ago that quiet ended things faster. She had de-escalated every single one of them, out of habit, out of reflex, out of years of being the person in the room who made things smaller instead of bigger. He had been manufacturing cause, picking fights she would instinctively put out, building a pattern he could point to later. She was always the difficult one. "I tried. You can ask anyone." So that when he finally walked, the story was already written. She had been de-escalating her way into a trap. Diane thanked Bianca. She kept her voice even throughout. She answered the few questions Bianca asked. Yes, the marriage was legally intact. No, there were no separation papers. No, there was no mutual understanding. She did not perform emotion. She gave the woman the truth she had been denied and let her do what she needed to do with it. The call ended. Diane stood, walked down the hall, and stopped in the living room doorway. Roland was on the couch, one arm stretched across the back cushions, the television throwing blue light across his face. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man without a single thing on his mind. He glanced over and saw her. He smiled. Easy. Warm. The smile she had once thought she knew the inside of. She smiled back. Then she returned to her office, sat down at her desk, and pulled the yellow legal pad to the center of the surface. She wrote 2 names. Harold, Patricia. Diane called Yvette at 7 the next morning. She was still in bed. Roland was already in the shower. She could hear the pipes in the wall, the familiar knock of old plumbing. She kept her voice low and her words brief. "Saturday. Your place. Bring the legal pad." "Already have one," Yvette said. "What time?" 2:00. "I'll make coffee." Diane hung up and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then she called Deshawn. He picked up on the second ring. He sounded like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. "Diane." "I need you to put what you know in writing," she said. "A written account. Dates, details, what Roland told you, what he sent you, what he used to keep you quiet. Everything." There was no hesitation, not even a breath of one. "Yes," Deshawn said. "Wherever you need it, however you need it. Saturday, 2:00, Yvette's." "I'll be there." She ended the call. The shower shut off down the hall. She set her phone face down on the nightstand and got up to start the day. Saturday was gray and cool, the kind of fall afternoon where the light sits low and flat and everything looks a little more honest than it usually does. Yvette's kitchen table was wide enough to spread everything across without anything overlapping. She had cleared it completely, not even a fruit bowl, not even a napkin holder, just clean wood and good light from the window above the sink. Diane arrived first and laid it all out herself. Bank statements on the left, organized by month. Deshawn's forwarded text screenshots in the center, printed and numbered. The cloud folder photographs, time-stamped, sorted, on the right. Her attorney's initial notes, emailed late Friday afternoon, tucked into a manila folder at the top edge of the table. She stood back and looked at it. It covered almost the entire surface. Deshawn arrived 10 minutes later. He walked in, saw the table, and stood still for a moment. His jaw tightened. He looked like a man confronting a thing he had been carrying alone for too long, and was only now seeing the full shape of. "Sit down, Deshawn." Yvette said, not unkindly, handing him a mug of coffee. He sat. He set his own folder on the table, his written account, 4 pages, handwritten first and then typed. He had clearly been up early working on it. Diane sat across from them both. She did not need to look at the documents. She had them memorized. 3 things, she said. That's all this is. 3 things, done right, done in order. Yvette had the legal pad ready. First, the divorce settlement has to reflect the equity line. Diane's voice was steady and unhurried. My attorney has the withdrawal records. She's already building the argument that what Roland did with that money constitutes financial misconduct. The settlement needs to recover what came from my name and my credit. That's not negotiable, and it's not complicated. The paper trail makes it simple. Yvette wrote. Deshawn nodded. Second, Harold. Diane folded her hands on the table. Roland's company holds contracts that run through Harold's parent company. Harold is a VP of operations. If Roland used a co-signed equity line to fund a 4-year affair, moved money in ways that could constitute fraud, that is a legitimate vendor integrity issue. It touches institutional finances. Harold has a professional obligation to escalate something like that when it's brought to him with documentation. You're not fabricating anything, Yvette said. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. I'm not fabricating anything, Diane said. I'm handing the right person accurate information and letting the institution do what institutions are supposed to do. Deshawn turned his mug slowly in his hands. He's going to know it came from you. Yes, Diane said simply. He will. Third, she paused. Patricia, their social circle, the people in Roland's life who are going to hear a story from him the minute he realizes what's coming. I am going to get there first. Not with drama, with facts. Same documentation, same timeline, same evidence. His mother first, then the others, in person, in small groups, with no performance. Yvette stopped writing. She looked up. Patricia's going to be hard, she said. Maybe, Diane said. But she deserves the truth, and I think she already suspects more than she's ever said. She excused herself from the table and went to Yvette's back porch. She took her phone and Patricia's number and sat down in one of the 2 chairs Yvette kept out there year-round. The yard was quiet. A bird moved through the oak tree at the back fence. Diane called. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was warm the way it always was with Diane. Warmer, Diane had always privately noticed, than it was with Roland in the room. Diane, honey, what a nice surprise. Patricia. Diane looked out at the yard. I need to talk to you about Roland. I want to give you the facts, and I want to give them to you directly, before you hear something else from somewhere else. Is that all right? The warmth on the line went quiet. Not cold, just still. Tell me, Patricia said. Diane told her, calmly and completely. The trips, the photographs, the woman's name. 3 years of documentation. The $40,000, the equity line, the manufactured arguments, the plan to leave Diane positioned as the one who failed the marriage. Patricia did not interrupt once. When Diane finished, the line was silent for a long moment. Outside, the bird in the oak tree changed branches. I need to see those photographs, Patricia said. Her voice was even, not shaken, resolved, in the way that people sound when a thing they suspected for a long time has finally been confirmed, and there is nothing left to protect. She paused. He always thought you wouldn't do anything. Another pause, briefer. I used to hope he was right. Her voice shifted, something in it settling, heavy and final. Now I'm glad he was wrong. Diane drove home from Yvette's as the sun dropped behind the tree line. She turned onto Garfield Avenue without thinking, and it wasn't until she was halfway down the block that she realized this was the street. The one with the narrow tan duplex where she and Roland had lived their first 2 years, newly married, the kitchen so small they had to turn sideways to pass each other at the counter. She had loved that kitchen. She looked at the duplex as she passed it. Same tan walls, different curtains, a child's bicycle leaning against the front step. She kept driving. She had work to do. Monday morning was cold and clear. Diane wore the gray blazer she kept for presentations, the structured one that sat perfectly across her shoulders. She arrived at Harold's office 12 minutes early, signed in at the front desk, and sat in the waiting area with her manila folder on her lap and her hands resting still on top of it. Harold's assistant showed her in at 9 o'clock exactly. Harold was behind his desk, reading glasses on, a coffee going cold at his elbow. He was a broad man with careful eyes and the particular kind of stillness that came from decades of knowing which problems were actually problems. He stood when she came in. "Diane," he shook her hand. "Sit down. Good work on the retreat, by the way. The Meridian group was pleased." "Thank you," she said. "That's actually not what I'm here about." She set the folder on the desk and opened it. She had organized it the same way she organized every operational briefing. Clean, sequential, no excess. Bank withdrawal records, the equity line agreement, bearing her name as co-signer. A summary document, 1 page, with dates and amounts and a brief notation of the contractual relationship between Roland's employer and Harold's parent company. Deshawn's written account was paper-clipped to the back. She walked Harold through it the same way she would walk anyone through a vendor compliance issue. Methodical. No emotion in her voice, just the facts laid out in the order that made them easiest to understand. Harold didn't speak. He read. He turned pages carefully, the way people do when they are making sure they are seeing what they think they are seeing. When he reached the last page, he took his glasses off and looked at her across the desk. "Is this what I think it is?" "It's exactly what it looks like," Diane said. He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved back to the folder, then back to her. "I wanted you to have it from me first," she said. Harold set his glasses down on the desk. He nodded once, a slow, decided nod. "I'll have this in front of the right people by end of day." By 3 that afternoon, an internal audit review had been initiated through the appropriate channels. Roland was not notified. He would not be. Not yet. Not by Harold's team. Diane was back at her desk by 4, responding to emails. She stayed at the office until 5:30, same as always. She set the table when she got home. The good dishes, the white ceramic ones with the thin gold rim they had received as a wedding gift and used maybe 4 times. 2 wine glasses, candles, lit. The bottle of red she had opened to breathe an hour earlier. She did not make plates. Roland's key hit the lock at 6:40. He came through the door with his jacket over one arm, already loosening his tie, and stopped when he saw the table. Something in his face softened. He smiled. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "Sit down," Diane said. "I'll get the wine." She poured both glasses. She set his in front of him and sat down across the table. She did not touch her glass. She did not have a plate. Roland looked at the empty space in front of her. Something shifted in his expression, small, quick, almost nothing. She placed the manila folder on the table between them. He looked at it. He looked at her. "Diane, let me finish," she said, quietly, not unkindly. She walked him through all of it, the cloud folder. She told him the subfolder name. She told him the number of photographs. She described the one taken in their guest bedroom without looking away from his face. He said it was old. He said it was nothing. She moved to the bank withdrawals. She read the amounts out loud, month by month, and watched him stop eating. He said it wasn't what it looked like. She placed Deshawn's written account on top of the bank records. She gave him a moment to see Deshawn's signature at the bottom. His jaw tightened, a flicker of something. Anger, she thought, though he managed it quickly. He said Deshawn didn't know the full picture. She placed Bianca's account, written up in Diane's own hand, dated, with the specific phrases Roland had used to describe her. Cold, let herself go, checked out of the marriage, sitting in a neat column on the page. Then she told him about the manufactured arguments. He was quiet for the first time. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His voice dropped to something low and carefully tender. "I love you," he said. "It got out of hand, I know that. But I love you, Diane. That has always been true." She looked at his hand on hers. Then she slid the divorce filing across the table. He stared at it. His eyes moved down the page, tracking the language, and then stopped at the exhibit attached to the back. The equity line documentation. Her name. The cosigner line. His face changed. "This could be a problem at work," he said. His voice was different now, harder, the tenderness gone like a light switched off. "Yes," Diane said. "It could." 3 quiet knocks at the front door. Roland looked up. Diane rose and walked to the door and opened it. Patricia Watkins stood on the front step in her good coat, her handbag over one arm. She looked at Diane for one long moment. Then she stepped inside, moved past the entryway, and sat down in the chair beside Diane's place at the table. She did not look at her son right away. When she did, she said nothing. She simply looked at him the way a woman looks at a thing she helped build and is finally willing to stop pretending is sturdy. Roland looked around the table. There was no corner left. He left at 9:15, one bag, the same black carry-on he packed every September for the boys' trip. He moved through the bedroom without speaking and came back down the stairs with it over his shoulder. He paused at the door. He didn't say anything. Maybe he was waiting for her to. She wasn't. He walked out. Diane turned the deadbolt. The sound of it, solid and clean, moved through the quiet house. She stood in the hallway for a moment. The candles on the table had burned low. The wine was still in both glasses, barely touched. The house was still. It was hers. The coffee maker finished at 5:52. Diane knew this because she had already been awake for 40 minutes, lying in the center of the bed, not her side, the center, watching the ceiling go from black to gray as the sun came up somewhere behind the clouds. She got up. She put on socks. She went downstairs. She poured her coffee and sat at the kitchen table. No second mug. No checking the time against someone else's alarm. No calculating whether there was enough hot water left if she showered first. She sat there for a long time, both hands around her cup, and let the quiet be quiet. Roland was placed on administrative leave 11 days later. Diane learned this not from Roland. She had not spoken to him since the night he walked out, but from her attorney, who had been told by Roland's attorney, who was trying to use the pending audit as leverage in the settlement negotiations. It didn't work. Diane's attorney, a compact woman named Beverly who had been practicing family law for 26 years and had exactly 0 patience for delay tactics, presented the financial documentation in full. The equity line, the withdrawal pattern, the 4 years of transfers traced back through Deshawn's texts and Roland's own forwarded messages. The settlement reflected all of it. Every dollar drawn from the equity line bearing Diane's name came back to her. The house, which she had lived in and maintained and painted and furnished, stayed with her. The process was not fast. Nothing in family law ever was. But it moved, and it moved in one direction. She met with their mutual friends in small groups. No announcement, no gathering. She called people individually and asked if she could stop by, or if they wanted to get coffee. And when she sat down with them, she told them what happened the same way she had told everyone else. Plainly. Without tears she didn't mean. Without asking for anything except that they hear it from her before they heard it from anyone else. Most of them already suspected something. People usually did, she found. They had just been waiting for permission to say so. 2 of them, Marcus and his wife Gwendolyn, mentioned that Roland had already reached out to them. He told them the marriage had broken down mutually, that both of them had grown apart, that it was complicated and painful, and that he hoped everyone could stay out of it. Marcus looked uncomfortable telling her this. "He called us the day after," he said. "I didn't know what to say." "What did you say?" Diane asked. "Nothing," Marcus said, "because we'd already talked to you." Roland's story had nowhere to land. He had built it carefully, she knew, the same way he had built everything, in advance, with an eye toward how it would look from the outside. But Diane had already been to every room he was counting on to shelter him. There was no version of events she hadn't documented, and no audience left who hadn't already heard the truth from her mouth, with the evidence to match. He had no more room to operate. Deshawn called her on a Wednesday evening in November. "It's done," he said. "I signed the dissolution papers today. The partnership's over." "What does that cost you?" Diane asked. "Less than it should have," he said. "Carrying that thing cost me more." She didn't argue with him. She thanked him. She meant it. And they stayed on the phone for a few minutes, talking about nothing in particular, the way people do when they've been through something together and don't need to keep referencing it to know it's there. Bianca was simply gone. No public statement, no social media mention. Her travel blog continued. New destinations, new posts, a smiling photograph in front of a harbor somewhere in Portugal. She had blocked Roland across every platform the day after she and Diane spoke, and she had not reappeared in the story since. She was not a villain. She was not a victim. She was a woman who had been handed a truth she hadn't known to ask for, and she had made her own exit. Diane did not think about her often. When she did, it was without anger. Patricia texted on a Sunday afternoon in October, then again in early November. Short messages. "Thinking of you. Hope work is going well." Once, a photograph of a sweet potato pie she had baked, with the message, "Made too much as usual. Offer stands if you want some." Diane replied every time. She accepted the pie. Patricia never mentioned Roland. She never apologized for him. She simply maintained the thread, quietly, consistently, as if she had decided that the relationship worth keeping in this situation was the one she almost lost by staying silent too long. The final divorce decree was signed on a Thursday afternoon in late January. Beverly's office was warm. The papers were organized in a neat stack, tabbed at every signature line. Diane signed each page steadily. Her handwriting was the same as always, controlled, clear, neither small nor large. Beverly notarized the last page, shook Diane's hand, and said, "You handled this with a lot of grace." Diane picked up her bag. She walked out into the afternoon. The sun was low and winter pale. The cold was sharp and clean against her face. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and waited to feel something she recognized. What came wasn't grief. It wasn't triumph either. It was clarity. Just that. Clear, the way a window is clear after you finally clean it. Everything on the other side exactly where it always was, just easier now to see. The ship was called the Meridian. Diane had chosen it the same way she had chosen everything in the past 14 months, deliberately, without consulting anyone's preference but her own. She had read the reviews, compared the itineraries, and booked the cabin she wanted, upper deck, starboard side, east-facing porthole for the mornings. Nobody else's morning to account for. Just hers. She stood at the rail on the main promenade deck as Miami shrank behind them. The port pulled away in pieces, the cranes first, then the terminals, then the flat Miami skyline going soft in the afternoon haze. The water behind the ship churned white and then settled back into blue. Yvette stood beside her, oversized sunglasses pushed up on her head, a frozen drink in one hand that she had acquired approximately 7 minutes after boarding. "I cannot believe," Yvette said, "that we are finally doing this." "We've been on trips before," Diane said. "We've been on trips you worked," Yvette said. "This is different. This time, if something goes wrong with the buffet, it is not your problem." Diane almost smiled. "Nothing will go wrong with the buffet." "You literally cannot help yourself," Yvette said, but she was grinning. The promotion had come 11 months ago. Harold had called her into his office, the real one, the corner one on the 14th floor, and slid a folder across the desk before she had even sat down all the way. "Senior Operations Director," he said. 3 properties. You'd be building the oversight structure yourself, which means you'd do it correctly instead of inheriting someone else's mess. Diane looked at the folder. "You've been considering this for a while," she said. It wasn't a question. "Since before the cruise," Harold said. "The integrity situation accelerated a decision I had already been moving toward. What you brought me, the clarity of it, the documentation, the way you presented it without asking me to make it personal, that's exactly the kind of judgment I need at the executive level." He paused. "I'm not promoting you because of what you went through, Diane. I'm promoting you because of how you think. Those are different things." She knew they were. She accepted the folder. Her apartment had east-facing windows in the bedroom and a kitchen with counter space she had never once had to negotiate for. She cooked in it on Sunday mornings. Real cooking, not the functional, scheduled meals she had produced for years to fit inside Roland's preferences and Roland's timing. She made things slowly. She made things she actually wanted to eat. She played music while she did it, whatever she felt like, without the low hum of awareness that someone else in the house might prefer the television. Small things. She knew they were small things. But she had learned, in the past 14 months, to pay attention to small things, because the small things were where you found out what you actually wanted, as opposed to what you had simply adjusted to wanting. By last account, Roland was rebuilding. The word that reached her through Patricia, through Deshawn, through the occasional mutual friend who still kept loose contact with both of them, was cautious. He had survived the audit, but only just. Professionally reduced, operating more carefully, no longer the man in the room who laughed the loudest and assumed no one was keeping score. He was somewhere in the city, living a smaller version of the life he thought he had secured. Diane did not follow his progress. She did not wish him harm. She simply did not think about him often, and when she did, it was with the flat, factual recognition of someone who had finished a difficult piece of work and had no need to revisit it. He had mistaken her composure for surrender. She had spent the past 14 months doing something else entirely. Yvette bumped her shoulder gently. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" The question landed simply, the way Yvette always asked it. Not probing, not worried, just checking. Diane considered it honestly. She let herself actually sit inside the question for a moment, instead of answering it reflexively, the way she used to, the way she had been trained to, with the automatic fine that meant, "I've already handled it, don't worry about me." The water was deep blue past the wake. The Miami skyline was nearly gone now. The sun was dropping toward the west, warm and unhurried, and ahead of the ship there was nothing but open ocean and the particular kind of quiet that only exists when you are moving away from shore. She thought about the woman who had stood at a ship's rail 14 months ago in the dark. Not this ship, a different one, a borrowed trip, a borrowed moment, and stared at the water and made a decision. She thought about everything that had been built since then, and what it had cost, and what it had returned. "I'm better than I've been in years," Diane said. "I just didn't know it because I was too busy managing what I had instead of wanting what I deserved." Yvette was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yeah, you were." The ship moved into open water. Diane turned her face toward the horizon. Not away from anything, toward everything still ahead. The ocean was enormous and calm. And so, finally, was she. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.